Welcome to You Decide. I'm your host, Errol Lewis. Single-term mayors in New York City are not the norm. The last time it happened was David Dinkins when he got voted out of office in 1993. Before that, it was Abe Beame who got voted out in 1977. But it is happening again, sort of. To the surprise of almost no one, Eric Adams has dropped out of the race. He didn't get defeated, but he saw the handwriting on the wall after a tumultuous 4 years that were marked by dismal polling, fundraising struggles, legal issues that made it impossible to mount a serious re-election campaign. He, of course, had a contentious relationship with the press, and that didn't help things. To talk about what it was like to cover the mayor, since journalism is the first draft of history, we're going to take a crack at this first draft with Kelly Mena from NY1's, my colleague, and Dana Rubinstein of the New York Times. Thanks for being here. Good to see you.
Thanks.
Hi.
Let's start by explain what it's like to cover the mayor every day. When do you find out where he's going to be the following day, and how do you set up for that?
Well, actually, we find out very late. Most of the time, it's between 10 p.m. and midnight, which is super late. I have a kid, so I'm not usually up, but I wake up early, so I just expect it in the inbox. Once we get that schedule, sometimes it has a lot of events, sometimes it doesn't have anything. Then we decide, it could be one event in the morning that he has publicly, and then we go to that event because, as we know, the mayor, you have to literally chase him if you want to get answers to any of your questions.
So you're finding out at like 5 a.m. what your day is going to look like?
Yes. Well, 6:30, between 6:30 and 7 a.m. Yeah, basically. But I will say that in the last couple of weeks, they've gotten a little bit better about putting out the schedule at a reasonable time. But really at the height of everything that was going on, it really didn't come out till midnight to a point where I would talk to their press shop and say, this is not helping the situation, putting it out so late because the planning and everything that goes behind it. Now we literally have to chase the mayor.
Is that sort of your schedule as well?
Yeah. I mean, we divide it up a little differently at the times where I'm responsible for 2 days of the week and other colleagues are responsible for different days. But yeah, I mean, I also have a kid, so I go to bed earlier than I think some of my younger colleagues. And yeah, I'll just lie there in bed and I do the crossword, which comes out at 10 p.m. and hopefully I don't fall asleep by the time the schedule comes out. But yeah, it's, there was like a real seat of the pants, flying by the seat of the pants feel to it.
So now explain for the listeners what happens with these famous off-topic sessions, right? So you say you're chasing him around because, even though they've announced their schedule, invited you all to come because they want you to propagate their message, when you try and ask certain kinds of questions, they just are not terribly cooperative? Is that pretty much the way it goes?
Right. I mean, there was a time when he had weekly off topics. That time no longer exists. And, I think you would recall better than me, but the whole off-topic, on-topic thing really originated in Bloomberg, right? This notion that you could only ask questions that pertained to the subject matter of the press conference sort of began then. And he really takes that seriously to the detriment of being able to ask him a lot of important questions.
Yeah, I mean, with Bloomberg, he kept a practice that his predecessors had adhered to, even Giuliani, who had a contentious relationship with the press. But after he finished telling you about whatever ribbon cutting or garden opening or whatever it was that was the topic of the day, he would take a couple of questions from people about other topics. Koch was, as famously, unavoidable for comment, right? He would always, Dinkins would talk to people about whatever was on their mind, whatever was on their agenda. But this mayor really just didn't want to do that and hasn't done that.
No, and I think that's part of his control factor that he has. We know that he's a micromanager. And so he really, I think for him, enjoyed the off topic because he felt like he had control over the messaging in the media, particularly around what he thought was not the right way of covering his administration and his behavior, decisions that he was making. And it's interesting you mentioned other mayors because de Blasio infamously would take every single question till the end. And literally there were no questions left. I mean, 45 minutes extra on press conferences. This mayor does not do that, And the off-topic, really became this moment where everybody would then use that opportunity to ask as many questions as possible. But then the mayor, it felt like, by the end, it really went the opposite way because it didn't do what he wanted it to do. Everybody was asking either about the same topic or asking questions so closely related that when he wanted to move on to another topic, it was impossible to get away from it.
You know, and I think the one part that I don't think the communications staff and certainly the mayor himself didn't understand or appreciate is that you guys have lots of questions as, you know, you're forwarding some from colleagues in your news organization who just want to clarify certain things. It's not a gotcha. It's not a narrative. It's not politics. It's just like the fire commissioner said this and the housing commissioner said that, and they don't quite go together. We just need to clarify when the next report's going to come out, something like that. And it didn't seem like the press office was prepared to handle that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the press office has varied in its responsiveness over time, for sure. But yeah, you know, Eric himself is not someone who seems to think highly of the press or think, you know, their role in New York society is, you know, something that he has to concern himself with all that much.
You know, to what extent do you think it contributed to the, I don't know how else to put it, the failure of the administration?
I think it contributed a significant amount, right? Because part of being the mayor is not only, you know, doing all these things for the city, but it's a figurehead. It's kind of like a microphone towards the city. And if your microphone is failing, you're obviously not getting that message out, right? And it continues to be a very big issue for this administration and to the detriment of the mayor, because the more he gets upset, the less he puts out. And then he continues to get more upset and the less information he puts out. Getting less information is not good for us, because the media's job is to help the public understand what you're trying to do, why it is important to you, and why the money of the city should go towards it. And so the less information you give us, whether you feel good or bad about it, is not ever helpful.
I want to do something. We don't normally do this, but so that listeners know what we're talking about, I want to play a section of this tantrum that he had where he basically lashed out. It looked like the accumulated frustration of months, if not years, of dealing with the press. This is a little bit of what it sounded like.
There was a book that came out that Jasmine Ray wrote. And in the Daily News today, it was stated that there was a sexual action that happened in Borough Hall. She reported in that book. And it wasn't. You're a dark, sick person, man. You know that? You're a dark, sick person. Your name was on the byline. And there's some of you that have been covering me. You guys could part. Let me do this. Y'all could depart. Y'all could depart. Some of you have been covering me for 3.5 years. Some of you are so sick and dark, and you're the leader of that. You're one of the most dark writers that I've ever seen in this city. And your personal sick vendetta and the sickness of how you think of over-sexualizing a black man, that in the book is stated that there was a sexual action in Borough Hall. That was never in the book. But that's typical of the sickness and the darkness of your sick mind. You're one of the sickest reporters I know. Go to the next question. You're a sick person.
What's your reaction to Letitia James getting indicted?
I'm going to do the same thing to her, what I ask of everyone. When I was going through my situation, let the process play out. People attacked me. They called me names. They destroyed an impeccable record in the city. Folks, I've been doing this for 40 years. I have 40 years of delivering for the people of the city of New York. And within months, my entire life was destroyed. And some of you who knew me joined the chorus of calling me all sorts of names. He made a deal. He did this. All of you that knew me, I was really surprised. And some of you broke my heart. I was surprised that y'all saw how impeccable my record was as a police officer, state senator, borough president, and as a mayor. And within months, because of a lawfare, you all of a sudden turned me into a criminal. You characterized my administration as corrupt. You didn't look at the dedication and commitment and the success of this city. And I noticed, you know what's interesting? I'm seeing none of you report some of the stuff that is coming out of the FBI of what happened under the Biden administration. I'm not seeing you report that. I'm not seeing you report some of the hidden records and the hidden files. I'm not seeing that anymore. But what you did in those months, to me, I'll never forget that. It was wrong. I did not deserve that. And as a mayor and as a public servant, I committed myself to the city, and I'm going to continue to commit myself to the city in the process.
So, yeah, what was that all about?
Man, a cork popping. I don't know what to even say because I felt like the mayor has these tantrums sometimes out of nowhere where you're not expecting it. We hadn't seen him in a while. He had just come back from Albania. First time we're seeing him. And all of a sudden, it's just like on a media rampage. We were asking questions at that day, was the following day after the New York Attorney General had gotten indicted. And he had read the papers and he went into a tantrum about Chris Sommerfeld, the Daily News reporter, about reporting he had done on the tell-all book, Political Humanity. And then after that, I had asked him a question about Black politicians. If we remember when he was indicted, he felt like there was a bit of racism going on because so many people asked him to step down. And so I just said, offered him an opportunity to say maybe what's happening to Letitia James. Do you feel like that's similar to your case? And he just totally went in and said no. He wasn't going to answer my question, and second, he basically questioned my fairness in covering his own indictment in his case.
Yeah, I mean, he's fashioned this narrative from the very beginning. I think it was in February or sometime early in his administration when he went up to Albany, didn't get everything that he wanted. The Daily News did what seemed like a fairly anodyne sort of treatment of it. And I remember being in the Blue Room, and he effectively told us that the press corps was racist. And I mean, that was his first year in office. And, obviously the press corps has diversity problems and all of that. But, he has never been one to sort of take ownership of any of the problems that have afflicted his administration. He really seems to believe that his tenure was marred irredeemably by the press's racist coverage of him. And he continues to this day.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and it's such an interesting defense, right? Because the moment you criticize something that's a fair point, whether it's funding for education, funding for libraries, things that really matter, and the answer is immediately, this is racism, kind of stops the conversation there. How do you come back from that? How do you work towards something that actually makes sense? And I think he used that as his first line of defense. And from there, that just became impenetrable and became an issue for the media.
It's interesting because there was a notable lack of diversity in his press team. So, if this was an issue, I don't know if it was just the news organizations that were contributing to it. Then secondly, as the only, Black anchor of a political show in New York, I couldn't get him on the show, He never,
so this day.
He never sat down for an interview with the Amsterdam News, as far as I can tell, the only Black
That's interesting.
newspaper. Yeah, I mean, he had it settled in his mind that this is what the case was. And then, you couldn't change him from it. And then you could also point to all of these different examples of dude, come on once in a while. You don't have to come on every week like de Blasio did, but you could show up once in a while and we could talk and, or if you want to make this case, we can get into it. I'll sit and talk with you for 20 minutes about racism in the press. I've lived with it for 40 years now. And we can get into the ins and outs, what's real, what's not real, where it's coming from, what it might mean. And those are all sort of lost opportunities, unfortunately. Let's talk a little bit, though. Let's set the record straight, as far as we can tell in this first draft of history, about what the administration did well and what it did not so well. I will start by talking about sanitation, because I'm the guy who takes out the garbage in my house. It has been an unabashed triumph that we have moved from leaving garbage on the sidewalk like 18th century peasants or whatever, to actually putting it in containers by law, setting it out on the sidewalk, and then somebody comes by and takes it away. And if there's a holiday, they actually just come the next day instead of sorry, you missed it. Columbus Day is a Monday, put out your recyclables next week. No, they come the following day. So I don't know who's responsible for it, but it happened on his watch, so I give him credit for it.
Well, and Errol, you compost as well, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I can. I mean, I've always wanted to. But they started by putting the little mailboxes around the city, and then they made it mandatory curbside composting and gave us the bins.
Well, I will say it was the city council that mandated the composting, to be clear.
Okay.
But yeah, I am also a composter. What I want to see, I mean, there's no place to recycle your electronics, howewer.
True.
Like that is a big hole.
The next frontier, yes.
Yeah, same with textiles. But, people credit him also with the city of Yes, with grappling, and this is something that also the council, was a big factor in. But, they credit him with setting the stage for increasing density in a significant way in New York City in the coming years, which may or may not help deal with the affordability crisis.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I think to his credit, too, this was a personal issue for him. The dyslexia screenings are very big, especially for children. We all have kids. It's important to catch things early on. The earlier you catch it, the earlier you address it. And, dyslexia can lead to so many other issues. I know people think about it as an education, but behavioral issues, and then so many going on till later in life. So I think that was important. And then obviously the housing component, because affordability here in the city is such a big deal. And it's interesting because housing, initially the way he sold City of Yes, many people weren't on board, but by the end, both his side of City Hall and the City Council were able to come to an agreement on it. And I think that's going to lead to a framework of lots of homes. He's put out this number of 400,000, but we'll see if that's how much it creates.
The number itself is a little shaky, but the rezoning is real. And I remember talking about it with his planning commissioner, Daniel Garodnick, who I think was their point person on it. And he said, we could have scaled it back and gotten an easier vote, but they were especially proud that they took it to a somewhat close vote in the council, meaning they pushed it further than they could have gotten away with to try and get more density and get a better deal and get a sort of a better roadmap to a denser city. And they absolutely deserve credit for that. I mean, we don't know how many units it's going to result in. He throws out these numbers, and it's kind of like, well, that's projected. I mean, that's not,
He compares actual built numbers of prior administrations to projected numbers emanating from his actions.
Yes,
which
exactly.
is a tricky way.
Pronounces himself as having done more affordable housing than the prior administrations.
Yes.
Any mayor in
ignoring
history,
LaGuardia.
Right. So, somehow, but that's fine. He's entitled to interpret his administration any way he wants. On the education theme, switching to phonics, which the Chancellor David Banks did, was it was overdue for one thing, but it was quite an achievement and an important one that will, I think, benefit kids going forward. Your kids will learn phonetically, which is what we should have been doing all along.
Definitely. I think it's interesting, we talked about race. One thing he did do is place a lot of these communities who felt like they were being overseen or not recognized enough into a spotlight. And that much I will say, because I've gone to so many of his events. They're not big highlight events, but there are these communities you go to and, they're like, this is the first time I'm seeing the mayor. Their children are learning better. They're getting, just better services in their communities. And they feel... One thing about New York City is when you feel seen, you feel like that pours into your community. That's important. And I think that's one thing that the mayor did, even with the way he set up his administration, bringing in people from communities, people of color, especially women in there, really helped him. And I think that's going to be something that his administration, many people are going to say he did a good job of doing. Because many of the people that he brought in, putting to the side the cronyism that he had, many of them were long-time civil servants that really had a lot of experience in the areas that they've been serving in. So they brought those ideas to the table.
There was a big question, though, about how empowered they were, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
In a showdown between the cronies and the professionals,
Yes.
The cronies often won the day and, in fact, reversed some of the decisions that had been made. I'm thinking about, some of the traffic patterns.
McGinnis Boulevard,
Yeah, McGinnis
for example.
Boulevard, yeah.
Well, and Randy Mastro has come in, speaking of, composting, we're talking about housing, we're talking about Elizabeth Garden, reversed that and put it on a different lot after they went all the way to court for that one. The composting, there was no more fines there. There's now the horse carriages. I think that's going to be something else that many people are going to look at, this idea that can you actually bring your friends to City Hall and can it actually work? And I think the answer is no.
Well, under Adams, it didn't. It didn't work, and then his administration fell apart. I mean, in part for that reason, right? I mean, there was at least one poll. It was one of the quality polls. It was either Quinnipiac or Siena, one of the university polls, where he ranked very high. This is shortly before he dropped out of the race, as corrupt / untrustworthy. And I was like, wow, that's very unusual for a sitting mayor. Not because people don't think that there are crooks at City Hall, because people always think that, but because it doesn't usually emerge as an issue. It doesn't usually rise to the level where people are like, there's wrongdoing and it's a serious problem and I can't trust the mayor.
Yeah, the public really seemed to absorb both the indictment and the courtship of the president to have the indictment abandoned. It really seemed to penetrate.
Yes. And in a surprising way to me, because there's so many basic issues that the public either doesn't notice or care about. And everybody locked in on what was a fairly sophisticated.
Agree. It was not uncomplicated.
Yeah. It was sort of complicated. Like the Main Justice browbeat the Southern District, and half the time you can't even get people to even understand what the federal prosecutor is as opposed to the local district attorney. Everybody was clear that there was something wrong there, and that didn't work out for him. The last of the things that I think he'll be remembered for, that I will remember him for, is getting healthier food into the schools.
Oh, yeah. I mean, veganism is, it's trendy now, but it's so healthy. I think that, and, speaking of healthier food, also this idea of meditation, in schools, that is such an interesting idea because it does help with health. But I think it's important to, talk about, it's fascinating to me because I feel like he didn't do enough when it came to his veganism.
Does it happen, though? I remember him doing a press conference about meditation and, breathing exercises and stuff, and that was the last I heard about it.
At my son's school, they do meditation for some of the grades. I don't know about everybody's, but yeah. So, but I'm surprised he didn't do more in that area than he went into so many other areas. That was one thing that I feel like could have been universal, but that just obviously they felt maybe, I don't know, they made their decisions.
I practically begged them to come on to talk about diet and wellness. I mean, I just, we don't talk about it enough.
Well, the rollout of the meatless Mondays or Fridays or whatever it was. I mean, I've been a vegetarian since I was 16. You can be a vegetarian and eat really poorly. And there were a lot of complaints about the quality of the food.
Oh, interesting.
Is pizza necessarily better for you than, a hamburger?
One thing I was going to bring up, I don't know if he did good or bad. Depends. I think as we get further away is obviously the migrant crisis. Some people might say he did a good job. Some people did a bad job. I mean, the city absorbed a significant amount of people, short amount of time. They were learning as they were going. I think that's just the way that administration works. Everything's, to your point, fly by the seat of your pants. They're not sure what's going to happen. I think that's something that everybody's going to remember, good or bad, because that's just, it affected so much. It affected the budget. Then the mayor instituted budget cuts. Then it got into this political, back and forth between Texas and New York City. And then he made that infamous comment about it's going to destroy the city. And it's interesting because a recent poll of Hispanic voters said that they actually want ICE enforcement here in the city. And I think that is one of those lingering impacts of seeing that big absorption of immigrants here in the city, that there is still people within the own immigrant community, or I guess Latinos, that still think that that's an important part of the business.
I thought the migrant crisis was it was not handled perfectly by any means, but the logistics of finding people places to live. I know some of the staff who were involved in that, and they performed nightly miracles, and God bless them, and they did what they did. Right, it wasn't perfect, but nobody starved to death. Nobody, we didn't have chaos in the streets the way some other cities did. On the other hand, that public statement about that this is going to destroy the city, I was like, that is not what the leader of the city should be saying. Like that, I thought was a real serious problem.
Well, and after what did he say? He said, bring them here. You know, the Statue of Liberty's in our harbor. You can't really go from welcoming to you're going to destroy us like in a matter of weeks. That just looks like you're flip-flopping. And, you know.
Early on, I remember seeing the Immigrant Affairs Commissioner, greeting people like dignitaries as they got off the bus. And I was thinking, that's probably not a good idea. It's because at first they really were like, hey, give us your tire and pour. We're fine. We're New York. And then they started sending, 8 buses a night, without warning. And it quickly became a problem that overwhelmed the administration.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like that is the one big crisis that the mayor got that I don't think any mayor could ever expect for, and it started so slowly, like this trickle. I remember the very first report was this family that stayed at the PATH station overnight in the Bronx, and that was illegal. And that then the mayor did a proactive press conference to be like, oh, it's only one family, and, we couldn't put them anywhere, but now they're sheltered. And then all of a sudden it led to like this explosion of people coming here.
Well, it's interesting because there's an after effect. I remember talking with one of the deputy mayors and asking, it was a rhetorical question, but it was a serious one. I was saying, if something happens every night, is it still a crisis? Because we were calling it like the migrant crisis. And I'm like, well, this is going to happen every night, indefinitely. Maybe it's just the new normal, right?
Right. And were prior influxes referred to as crises in New York City? I mean, part of it was that they were required to shelter, right? And so to the extent that he likes to cast his handling of it as like an act of magnanimity, it was also something that he was legally required to do. But he was really all over on that issue, to your point. The messaging was chaotic.
Yeah. And, there was something in, I think of this as one of the holdovers from being a local politician. He started out as a state senator.
Yeah.
So were you on part of that trip when he went down to Central America?
Right.
I was like, what?
Well, and also I was thinking what, he's going to go into the jungles and set up a fence and anybody that crosses over this fence, you can't what are you going to do?
He said he wanted to see it for himself. And my sense then and even after the fact was that he wanted to be able to come back and say, I am the expert on this because I went down and looked at it. You didn't go and see it. I saw it for myself. And he would talk that way about Rikers Island, which has been a complete disaster.
I've been to Rikers Island more than any mayor in the history of New York City.
And where did it get us? He was
rebaptized on Rikers Island.
I saw that.
Right.
I saw that. I mean, but those, sometimes there are points where political symbolism is extremely important, and it helps seal people's understanding of your relationship to an issue or what it is you're planning to do. In that case, it had almost the opposite effect.
It was very evocative of the way Republican politicians go to the border and stand by the border wall.
They look through their binoculars and,
But obviously that kind of sort of migration across national boundaries is incredibly complicated and not necessarily something you can just learn how to handle by making a quick trip there.
Well, he ended up not even making it to the actual Darien Gap because it was such a security. Yeah, it was such a security risk. It was so interesting too because he announced it like everything, last minute. We're just going down there, and it's just and in it literally says we're going to the Darien Gap, which is so dangerous. And then obviously he wasn't able to get in. So
right. Yeah, that was not a high point. One of the high points, though, I thought was the way they, in addition to doing the sanitation, they did move down some of the crime numbers. It was done in a chaotic way, and the monitor says that the rights were violated along the way, and there's too many stops still, and there's some questions about whether or not they're adhering to what the court wanted as far as dialing back on racial profiling. But if you put everything else aside, even with the record high number in assaults, even with all of the other bad numbers, there are two good numbers, which is shootings are down and homicides are down.
In concert with national trends, yes.
Yes. Well, it's interesting. I've done talks with like the mayor of Baltimore. I was on a couple of panels with him. My feeling is, you know what? Everybody take the credit. Everybody has a different strategy, and everybody swears their strategy is.
We hit them for high crime, so you have to give them some credit
Exactly.
when crime does go down, for sure. But it is also unclear how much policing policy, what the effect is versus just other things, right?
Yeah.
We're coming out of our post-pandemic malaise and whatever.
Sure. No, and the thing about the NYPD is they insist that all good news about crime is only due to the NYPD, and all bad news about crime is somebody else's fault.
It's due to Albany, right?
It's
and
Albany,
the judges.
It's the politicians,
The states,
it's the district attorneys, it's the
lawmakers,
courts, it's the judges, it's everybody. It's absolutely everybody except for the cops.
What's their line? We're doing our job. They need to do their job.
That's right.
And the mayor would say that.
He still does. He still does. That was his number. That was one of his big things. I think in the second or third year was getting some of those, some changes in the state law when it came to bail reform, because he felt like the only way they could get crime down was through state help, and that they were doing everything they could on their end, and there wasn't more that could be done without them.
Yeah, that's an example of where the mayor is at best a conductor of the symphony, that you have to try and get all of these things together. It's not easy. That's why you have a criminal justice coordinator.
Like you've got a guy driving in from Vegas with a gun he purchased there, shooting up a Midtown office building. I mean, there are things you simply cannot control.
Right. That is life
The
in New
iron
York City.
pipeline, all of it.
Now, here's a couple of things that he could control. And I feel like it sort of fell down a memory hole, but you were there. You guys were there. Early in the administration, there was a story in the New York Times about this photo of a fallen officer that the mayor claimed he kept in his wallet. And so he made the claim, okay, fine. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. But he pulled it out and he showed it to people. He made it like a thing. And then through some reporting, you all discovered that it was fabricated.
Yeah, it was my colleague Emma Fitzsimmons. Yeah, that it had actually been like printed out. I mean, maybe at some point he did have a photo in his wallet, but the one that he was showing people had been printed out and discolored sort of artfully. I don't remember the method, whether it was coffee or whatever. But I mean, what was interesting about that story and what was interesting about the story about him not truly being a vegan and eating fish, which was Sally Goldenberg's story, is, these things sow distrust. You want your leaders to be honest with you about the little things, so that hopefully they'll be honest with you about the big ones.
Well, it's interesting we're bringing up those stories, because that's something that the mayor brings up all the time. Just like when I was a kid, I carried black bags around with my stuff in them, and all these things that you can't really...
Unprovable things.
Yes, exactly. Unprovable, but even today, it's so funny. He was on a radio show and he said something like, when I came into office, people were sleeping in trees. And I was just like, were they?
Really?
And then another reporter was like, maybe he meant bushes. I go, did he? But it's just like those little things that he says that you're just like...
My favorite in that genre was because he one of his things about like his tough upbringing was that he had taken a gun to school, and it had nearly turned into a tragedy and his life would have been different and all this stuff. And then he says, well, that didn't really happen. He said, well, but it's in your book. He said, well, the book was never published. And then somebody produces the book with his name on it. With his name on it. I went out and bought it just for the heck of it.
Did you read it?
I just verified that the passage did indeed exist.
I also have the book.
But
yes.
what a strange thing to do. I mean,
yeah, there were a lot of unforced errors, right?
Well, he's a fabulist, I think is what you would call it, and that's different from just a run-of-the-mill political liar, right? He tells a story for the truth of the story. And
the emotional truth of the story.
The emotional truth of the story, whether it happened or not, or whether it happened to somebody else or not. He'll adopt it as his story, or he'll amend it. He'll sort of, and as long as the emotional truth is there, if you're not helping him tell that story, you're the problem, not him.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I guess that's what we all failed to do to his satisfaction.
I think that's the issue, right? Because he wants to continue with his narrative about whatever it might be. I think the other thing about the mayor is because he came from Borough Hall for 8 years, and it's a position that nobody really pays attention to. Covering him at Borough Hall, he would do and say those things too. But nobody would fact check him because they're like, it's just the borough president. It's just like the borough president trying to make noise and like end up with some lines in a story.
Right.
But when you're the mayor, that same thing just doesn't work.
I mean, he was the master of many strange ceremonies at Borough Hall. Did you remember the dead rat thing?
Rat soup? I was there for that.
I cannot believe you were
for my
there.
listeners, he called everybody. He called everybody down to Borough Hall, and he had some contraption that was just designed to trap rats and then drop them into some sort of toxic brew. Yes. And he performed it in front of you.
He was ladling rats out of the brew, dead rats.
I was there for that.
That's wild.
Because they have to wait till it kind of fills up. And
Why?
then that's because you want to catch as many rats as possible type of thing. It's not like a one and done thing. So then once you get I don't know how many dozens of them, but then you can't let them sit for too long because then they disintegrate in there. So you kind of have to take them out. And so they showed us the whole thing. It was wild. And I remember it, not just the rat soup, but how much it cost per contraption was this significant amount. I want to say it was in the hundreds. And it was supposed to be a pilot program. I don't know if it was ever used, but that was one of the highlights of him at Borough Hall.
Well, he also relatedly said that he had a pet rat when he was growing up named...
called it Mickey.
Very good, Mickey, yes. There was also the Bola Wrap press conference at Borough Hall. Do you guys remember that one?
No.
Bola Wrap was the lasso-like contraption.
Thing, yes, that the NYPD said does not work. It's
But
supposed to.
yeah.
It's like something out of the comic books.
Yes.
It would shoot a rope with two weights around it and
Kevlar
wrap around
rope.
the legs of the fleeing
Oh, my
felon
gosh.
and bring him down. But there was some shady deal where Carone.
Frank Carone was invested in
His
Bola Wrap.
His chief of staff, the former lawyer for the Brooklyn Democratic Party, somehow owned this company.
Well, what had investments in
Had
it.
investments in the
didn't own
company,
it,
and they wanted a big fat contract from the city.
But PD was like, this is not
This is
useful.
crazy. It doesn't work. It's a crowded city. We don't need to be doing
Can you
Batman
imagine?
stuff. Yeah.
Or the subway robot. Remember the Wall-E-like
yes.
subway robot?
Yeah, he rolled it out with the dogs, the digi-dogs.
The Digidogs, and another contraption that could fire something at the back of a fleeing vehicle and attach to it.
When it's
Big on the
star something. I forget what it
My
was
favorite
called.
was the drones that would patrol the harbor, and if somebody was drowning on the beach, it would throw a life preserver down
and
on
talk
you,
to them, I think.
and tell you what to do.
I'm not sure that they have any saved lives.
Zero.
Yes.
Yeah.
Zero.
I don't
Last
think they've
I checked, it
actually
was
even thrown down a life preserver ever. Those drones, they've videotaped people getting saved, but not ever thrown one down.
What they do is clear out the beach very often because they see sharks.
Right. And the sharks for 500 years have been hanging out off the coast of the beach, but
Right.
only now have we detected them, and they would panic people out of the beach.
Right. As you know, I spend a lot of time at the beach, and there was a lot of time this summer where I was just sitting there with my kid for 45 minutes while they cleared out the beach.
Yeah,
fun.
yeah. It's been a really interesting 4 years.
Totally.
I think that some of the procurements, when the next administration comes and does some kind of a forensic audit, I think we're going to find, at best, waste and maybe some inside dealing.
Which is interesting because he ran for office promising to, I guess all mayors root out waste.
Yeah, cut fat.
I mean,
that's always what they say, right?
Efficiency, yeah.
Because you want to hear that because that means my money's being spent well.
But what's interesting is the plumbing of the city, making stuff work the way it's supposed to work, getting applications processed faster. That there's no ribbon cutting, there's no glory, there's no glamour, there's no photo op, compared with an unusable, worthless robot, which at least is kind of interesting for a day.
Fun story.
Yeah, fun story. Utterly useless, right? This big Weeble-looking thing that was rolling around.
And I just want to quickly bring up, the gun detector machine, but it can't detect knives.
Oh, Evolve. The
Evolve
yeah.
machine also was one that they were
the
looking
idea
to.
of gun detectors at all 322 subway stations.
Yeah. The Evolve, those you do see everywhere, I will say. There must be some utility to them, right? They're at the Met, they're at all sorts of fancy institutions.
I don't know if they're useful, but you sure did pay for them.
You got to put them up. You got to do something
we
with them.
taxpayers sure did pay for them. Very interesting. Well, look, how if you had to summarize it, how would you? My theory, which I've explained to my audience again and again, is that each new mayor, is a specific response to the mayor before them. They either are a response to the problems of that prior mayor, or they have been bequeathed a major problem from that mayor. The easiest example, of course, being Mike Bloomberg, the richest man in New York City, is succeeded by Bill de Blasio on the theory that the rich have had a party for the last 12 years. We need to do something more for the working class neighborhoods. If nothing else, he represented that. What are we bouncing off now? Like, what just happened?
I think untrustworthiness, maybe some ethical questions. I think those were definitely serious issues. I don't think that the mayor created our affordability issue here in the city, but in the 4 years, he had so much going on, you could call it a distraction, that wasn't something that he could focus on. And so I think whoever comes as the next mayor is inheriting that issue because of the mayor right now just couldn't address it because of so many other things that were going on.
Dealing with migrants and everything else, legal problems. Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree. I think that Mamdani successfully sold himself or branded himself as an earnest, candid truth teller. And I think he did so. And when it was a canny move that, seemed like a direct response to some of the, honesty issues that seem to pervade City Hall. So, what that means in practice once he presumably wins the election and takes office, I do not know. But he does seem like a response to that aspect of the Adams mayoralty.
Yeah.
I was going to say maybe even, Errol, Adams is a response to the Bill de Blasio administration after 2020 and the George Floyd protests. It felt like Mayor Adams himself was a response to that. Because if we remember, de Blasio, by the end, at the Academy graduations, they would turn their backs to him, So I think the mayor, that law and order was resonating with a lot of people, and that he was the response to that particular issue. But I don't think to everything that was wrong in the de Blasio administration.
Right. No, that's right. And I don't know the extent to which law and order is top of mind. I mean, it's an interesting point that we're at, because I just talked with Curtis Lewa, and he says that's the issue. And I keep thinking,
it has to be the issue for him.
Well, right. And if that's the problem, he's a plausible solution. If that's not the problem, he's going to have a problem on election day, right? I mean, I think I said the same thing to Cuomo, because if you remember when Cuomo first got in the race, it was about how, New York's falling apart, there's a law and order problem, and so forth and so on. And I've been saying this for a while now. Kelly's heard me say this. She sits next to me in the news. But that it's like, you might get robbed twice in your life. You might have somebody put hands on you once in your life. You might be a victim of crime. But if you're broke every day. And it's a problem that never goes away. And it haunts your mind, and it structures your life, and it erodes your possibility, and it kills your spirit. And people are really, really, really tired of living that way. I mean, I think that is what is powering Mamdani's rise. He's got a lot of other things going on, but I think that's where he really kind of hit exactly where a big chunk of the city is right now. And we'll see if he can ride it into City Hall. So
yeah, I mean, and deliver on it, right?
Okay. Well, whatever happens, we know who's going to be there. And I thank you all for giving us a little insight into what's happening as we close the book on the Adams administration and get ready for the next one. Thanks a whole lot.
Thank Errol.
you.
Do you want more conversations with the people who are shaping the future of New York City and beyond? Check out our New York One podcast channel in the description. And hit subscribe to let Spectrum News be your resource for balanced, in-depth political coverage, elections, and issues.